But this morning, I'm going to talk about St. Mary's, St. Mary's Mariposa Avenue in Los Angeles, in the neighborhood now known as Koreatown, formerly known as Uptown, was one of the first Japanese American suburbs of downtown Los Angeles. It's about 3 miles from the very center of downtown. And I'm going to say, before I sort of talk about the process that happened at St. Mary's while I was there from 2011 until 2019, that St. Mary's is a 115-year-old church, and it has a tremendous and interesting and unique history as one of the only historically Japanese and Japanese American churches in the Episcopal Church. And I'm not going to tell that story this morning. So just know that you're only hearing one little slice of St. Mary's life, and that it would probably be important to longtime St. Mary's folks that I say that before I start talking about our neighborhood adventures. So I'm going to share some pictures just to help you visualize. So this is St. Mary's. Obviously, St. Mary's without any people in it. But this is St. Mary's as it was viewed by the people who were worshiping there when I got there. And while St. Mary's has kind of a unique history, it also has a lot in common with a lot of Episcopal churches. It was chock full in the 50s and 60s. It was still kind of going strong up through the 80s and 90s. People remember that about 20 years ago, there were a ton of people, but people who were 30 also remember being the only kid in Sunday school. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between exactly how long ago it was that things were full and flush. Almost to a person, St. Mary's members, when I arrived in 2011, lived at least 20 to 30 miles from the parish, mostly in kind of upper middle class suburbs of LA, in leafier, less gritty places than the neighborhood where St. Mary's was. So everybody drove. And many people had not stepped off of St. Mary's parking lot on foot for 20, 30 or more years. They would come, they would park in the parking lot, they'd get out of their cars, they'd come in. And so from their perspective, this is mostly what St. Mary's looked like. And they'd been trying for 5 or 10 years by the time I got there to see if they could attract some people from the neighborhood as the existing congregation shrank. And I love this picture because it has these Advent banners, and it pretty much nails their strategy. Was that they were watching, mostly from inside, waiting for people to come and receive their invitation, and praying that somehow it would all work out. And it wasn't working very well. The result was largely what you see in front of you, which is an empty church waiting for new people. So one of the very first things that we did at St. Mary's was the very first year that I was there, we did a vestry retreat on site rather than going off to some lovely parish near the beach or into the mountains, which are the popular places to vestry retreat in LA. And we did a little walking tour of the neighborhood. People went out in groups of 2, and their instructions were to take pictures of anything that they found interesting or relevant as they walked through the neighborhood. And I'm going to show you some of those pictures and tell you a little bit about what we observed. The one assignment that they had was that the first thing that they had to do was see what St. Mary's looked like from across the street. So that is, hopefully, this is what they saw. So it looks like a church, and it's pretty much impossible to tell what its name is. And right where you might think you would go in, there's a locked gate. What they would have told you is, well, that's not actually, even though that's the side that the address is on, that's not actually where we go in. So we went around to the other side. And there's the other side. There is a name. It's hard to see from the street. And between you and the name, there's another closed gate and a threat that your car will be towed if you come inside. And there's one more way to see St. Mary's from the street. And this is it. It's behind the vacant lot that is also owned by the church, in between two apartment buildings that are not owned by the church. So that was the first step, was how are we perceived in the neighborhood? And it was the first time that people believed me, that when I had been chatting up neighbors in various settings, what I heard was, oh, I didn't know that was a church. I assumed it was closed. I thought maybe it was Korean. And it certainly didn't occur to me that it would be a place that I could go to church. And from the inside, that seemed like a really strange set of perceptions. And from the outside, not so much. So this is St. Mary's neighborhood. There's sort of two ways in from the freeway. So if you came in from the south, this is what you saw. This is Olympic Boulevard in Los Angeles. And you will see that from the southern perspective, our neighbors are mostly Korean speakers. If you came in from the north or the east, you saw more Spanish and more Latino neighborhoods, more Latino neighbors, that is. So one of the first things that we did was try to unpack just a little bit who our Latino neighbors were. There's a bit of a sort of language division of labor in central Los Angeles among churches. And there's another church fairly close by that was doing ministry in Korean. So St. Mary's, in some historic process, had been assigned Spanish. As you can see, one of the things that we had to accept pretty much right away was that English was not really a going concern in this neighborhood. So when we looked a little closer at the businesses, we saw that a lot of our Spanish-speaking neighbors were from one state in Mexico called Oaxaca. So this market is a Oaxacan market that also has products from Mexico and Central America. And I love this window of a panaderia as a bakery, and it's got bread from El Salvador, bread from Guatemala, and bread from Mexico. And then a list of things that if you were from one of those places, you would know what they were.